So do you remember when I mentioned getting the Sony FX6? Well, guess what? It's here. And we're gonna do this thing. We're gonna do this thing right now. Right here. So this then is the Sony FX6. And it is an interesting camera. It is lightweight. The things you heard about people saying it was lightweight, all true. Very lightweight camera. It is well constructed, it is well made, and it feels good, you know, pretty solid in the hand, especially this middle section, which clearly this entire middle section of the body is a metal construction, magnesium alloy is my understanding. So all through the central core of the camera is metal, and essentially the only parts that are plastic on this are these panels that fit over that middle core. So it's a very solidly built camera. No fears about knocking this about. You shouldn't have any problems. And I think if these panels were to become damaged for any reason, scratched or beat up, it would probably be an easy thing to just go ahead and get replacements for these, and they could probably pop right on. I don't know if they screw on or if they just clip on or how they work, but I don't think it'd be that big of a deal. So long as this middle core is protecting all the inner workings of the camera, you should be good to go. I'm talking about that. I want to remove this piece here, and this is for, of course, the top handle. And this top handle, so again, that you're aware of this entire thing appears to be essentially magnesium alloy. There are some plastic pieces, but they are few and far between. So for example, this bottom piece here appears to be plastic, but it's merely covering this hole where the electronics go. So they had to hollow this out in order to fit the electronic components. So they covered that with this plastic cover, but the entire handle outside of that, and with the exception of this rubber piece, which is to enhance your grip, is metal. You can even see the texture into the metal. The entire thing is magnesium alloy. So it's well made. It's well made, and I will go one better. Even this housing for the microphone appears to all be metal. None of this is plastic. This is all metal. So if you were concerned that you would have your microphone rattling around in this metal housing and it would be flimsy, I can assure you that this metal housing is not flimsy at all. This metal housing is really, you know, it's exactly that. This is all one, appears to be one piece, molded from one piece of magnesium alloy. So it's built well. This Sony is genuinely built well. I'm going to screw this on, see if I know what I'm doing. I guess this goes in there, and these kind of captive screws I really like. I like this kind of arrangement where you have these captive screws. And the reason why I like it is because you don't lose anything. You know, when you're out in the field, it's very easy to misplace things. And when you have a captive arrangement like this, and the idea that they're also hand-tidable maybe, is great, because it means you can quickly remove them, put them on, and take them off in the field, no worries. And this, I don't know if this is the first camera to sport this kind of arrangement as far as the handle goes, but I really, really like this. I think that this is brilliant, that it essentially goes on in much the same way that a lens would, and then you're simply able to, and if you see me keep looking up, it's because there's a camera up there, and I'm looking at the monitor, but this arrangement here is really quite wonderful. I think that this is great. And well, before I say it's great and give it too much praise, let me just make sure I know how to get this on. So I'm assuming it's just a simple, do we have the dots like on, oh, it's just like on a lens. So you simply line up the dots and clip, and you're done. Now, how do we release this thing? I think I've heard people talk about oh, I see. You see that? So this little switch, I was wondering earlier about, I don't know if I'm facing the right way. If you can see that, I'll go with the top down. This little switch here is essentially the release. So if you want to move this around, right here at your thumb is the release. You can just turn your camera angle to whatever really works for you. Then we have this little guy here. This is the, I'm assuming, the connector. There's a place for it. It's hidden, kind of hidden. Hidden for me anyway. You plug that in right in, let's see if I can get it right in there. And that's it. I think that's it. Is it in? That's it. And then this merely goes on again. So the other thing we have is the monitor, lest I forget. And I don't know that if you can see that, but there's actually some controls on the bottom. You can mirror, you can rotate, and there's this B/T. Don't know what that is. Don't know what B/T is. So now that the camera's all together, now that it is all in its natural native form, wow, I'm really loving this top monitor. I may start shooting with it and hate it, but right now, I think it looks awesome. I think this is just so, it's such a nice little package. So seriously, you didn't think I was gonna just end the video and not do any frames from the brand new Sony FX7. Of course I had to. I have to share this experience with you. So this is the much talked about S-Cinetone, and it's awesome. It's awesome. I'm looking at the monitor just out of frame, and I'm looking at everything, the image, the colors, the exposure, because I set up the variable NDs. I just said, okay, run variable NDs auto to fix my exposure, because I was originally configuring the lights to match up with the slower Canon lens, which is a 2.8 f-stop. So it's a slower lens on the Canon and a faster lens, a 1.4 on the Sony. So everything was overexposed. I turn on the variable NDs and voila, it's fixed. And no color shift. No color shift whatsoever. This has always been like the bane of my existence when it comes to ND filters, is that no matter which ones I use, and I've used quite a few, they almost always seem to do something to the color, whether they're shifting a little brown, whether they're shifting a little green, whether they're always shifting it some way. And then for the scenes that don't have the ND versus the scenes that do, you're having to fiddle with color grading when you get it into post. Pain in the neck. This absolutely removes that problem. And the colors I'm seeing, the exposure that I'm seeing, to my eyes looks very good. I can't complain. I see everything is more or less in check. It all looks pretty good. And it shouldn't, because it's blown out. It should be well blown out. But to my eyes, it's looking pretty good. So what I am going to say is this camera is probably one of the best. Well, let's face it, it's the best I've used. And as for a run and gun situation, something that you're going to go with, something you need to be up and running quick with, that you don't have time to fuss too much with, I think there's going to be a few better choices, honestly. And the main thing that separates this, in my eyes, from what I can see from the Canon, is, and you feel free to comment on this if I'm mistaken, but to my eyes it looks much more cinematic. Now that gets thrown about a lot, that term, cinematic. Let me explain. Most of what I see that people think is what's making an image cinematic, like lighting, camera movement, framing, yes, these things all contribute. But I've also seen footage where it's just somebody with zero experience, they know nothing of lighting, they know nothing of framing, they know nothing of anything. And yet the camera images, the images that they're capturing with that camera still look like they were shot with a Hollywood movie camera. And the reason why is nothing to do, obviously, with lighting or cinematic this or that. It's nothing to do with that. What it is to do with is a thing called motion cadence. Motion cadence is how the image from frame to frame and within the frame flows, how each frame is created. So on most of the cameras that we know and love for cinematic images, you'll notice that the vast majority of these cameras tend to have very fast rolling shutter or a global shutter. So your Arri Luts are like 2 milliseconds when they're rolling shutter. I think some of them now are global shutter. Your Reds are fast rolling shutter or global shutter, as in the case of the Komodo. A legendary camera from old, I think 2014 vintage, was a camera by the name of the Digital Bolex D16. And that camera, any idiot could pick it up, no experience. A child could pick it up, not that children are idiots, but they have no experience with these things quite often. And if they were to pick it up and just, flail it about, it would still look like it was shot with a Hollywood movie camera. And the reason is because it had a global shutter. So A lot of people think film is global shutter, but film actually isn't. There's a round thing that goes around, it's hard to explain, but it looks like a pizza pie and there's a cutout. And it exposes each frame of film as it spins. So it's not actually global shutter. Film is just a very fast rolling shutter. So if you have a camera with a very fast rolling shutter or adequately fast rolling shutter, you end up with a very filmic type reproduction, even if the person's just flailing the camera around. I've seen footage shot on this camera, the FX6, at 48 frames per second, and I was always told that's going to look like video, and it didn't look like video. It looked great. It actually looked better than 24 frames. No video artifacting, didn't look video at all. Didn't have that soap opera feel, none of that. It just looked good, and it looked clean. So I'm thinking that there's a threshold at which point your rolling shutter is fast enough so that it takes on the vibe, the feel, the essence of film. And I think this camera may have that. Correct me in the comments. If this looks bad, I haven't seen the actual recorded footage, but if it looks bad, let me know. If it looks good, let me know. And that's all I can really say. I think it's, all in all, I think this is a pretty amazing camera. And I think that we're in for special times. If this is representative of what's coming, then we're in for a special time. And I can only hope that at some point, the technology from that, specifically obviously this camera, the FX6, borrowed heavily from this camera, which is the Sony A7S III. I can only hope that the technology from that, things like the electronic ND, eventually make their way into the mirrorless lineup, because that would be a really special thing. And I am also hoping that Sony will, in their wisdom, make a version of this camera that utilizes a higher resolution sensor so that we are able to have a Super 35 mode on this as well, because that's probably the only thing missing from this camera. But still, what would you rather, Super 35 mode or full frame? And that's not really a hard decision for me. I think full frame is going to win every time. And by the way, so you do know, there is a ability of this camera, as also this camera, to zoom in. It's what they call clear image zoom. And the clear image zoom, they claim, is essentially lossless. Now, some have claimed that there is loss in quality when you do this, but honestly, you're going to have to pixel peep to see it. And I think most people, unless you tell them that there's a loss in quality, won't perceive it. I haven't, and I've used it several times. So if you need Super 35, you can always just enable the clear image zoom, which I did on this camera and I did on the Sony A7S III, and just use that. It's a bit of a cheat, but it works. And to my eyes, there's nothing wrong with the image whatsoever. So there's a handy tip. Please comment, let me know what you think of this footage. I wasn't going to show it, but then I just couldn't resist. I had to get this out there. I had to show you what this camera can do. Now, granted, this is in a studio setting, so make of that what you will. And I may be overexposed here. I don't know how that's going to look in post. I didn't mess with anything. I could have turned down the light a little. I could have just adjusted the light that's hitting my shoulders. But I wanted to see what that variable ND, what it could do. What do you think? Is this better than the footage you've seen from the C70? Is it worse? How does it compare to that, well, to that Sony A7S III? Would you like to see a comparison of that camera with this camera? Let me know. Hit me up in the comments. Please like and subscribe. I'll catch you next time.